Just what you want to see early in the morning, right?
Yeah.
We're on. Okay, good morning. Welcome to Solid Rock Sabbath Fellowship as we begin day 4 of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Well, day 1 was Passover, so day 3 of Unleavened Bread. Um, and we have been having great blessings this week. It's been a delight. This morning, as we continue our theme of cleansing, I'm going to be talking about the woman at the well. Sorry, Bob, I couldn't help it. I said, I'm going to be talking about the woman at the well. No, I'm teasing you. He's been sharing about the woman with the issue of blood all morning, and I just had to do that. Yesterday, when Gary shared on Captain Naaman, he had one Bible source, one chapter to go from. We have 3 today with the woman with the issue of blood. So we're going to look at all 3 of them because they each teach us a little bit different or share different information. Um, so a little context for the day that Yeshua was having. He had been across the lake uh, on the eastern shore, I think, and where it was more primitive, and he had healed demoniacs, and he had a day, and he'd come back, and there were people waiting for him, and they were all clamoring over him, and he healed and comforted there for a while, and then went to Matthew's house for a feast with the publicans, and then an official from the synagogue came begging him to go save his daughter. So he gets up to go, but then outside there's a bajillion people bustling and bumping into him and carrying on. And so he'd had a day of this, of people all wanting something from him. Um, I would not have been as patient as him, I'm afraid, in dealing so lovingly with every single one and not missing a single one. Um, but that's kind of the context of the story that we're going to get to today. Um, and so they were on their way, and one of the servants of Jairus came and said, "Don't bother him, she's dead." And Yeshua just said, "Don't worry, believe only, and she will be made whole." And so then they proceed on. So let's turn to Matthew 9, verses 18 to 26. And I think I have my mic. I don't have anybody to rove it for me. Oh, you have it back there? Okay. If somebody would like to read those verses, 18 to 26 in Matthew 9.
And when Yeshua saw large crowds about him, he gave a command to go off to the other side. I'll start again. And when Yeshua saw large crowds about him, he gave a command to go off to the other side. And a certain scribe, having come near, said to him, "Teacher, I shall follow you wherever you go." And Yeshua said to him, "The foxes have holes, and the birds have of the heavens nests, but the Son of
Okay, are you
Man-"
in Matthew 9?
Matthew, oh, I'm sorry. 9.
Good story, but not the
Yeah, not the right one.
18 to 26.
Okay, 18 through
26.
26. While he was saying all this to them, see, a ruler came and bowed down to him, saying, "My daughter is dead by now, but come and lay your hand on her, and she shall live." And Yeshua rose and followed him, his taught ones too. And see, a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched the tzitzit of his garment. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his garment, I shall be healed." But Yeshua turned, and when he saw her, he said, "Take courage, daughter. Your belief has healed you." And the woman was healed from that hour. And when Yeshua came into the ruler's house and saw the flute players of the crowd making noise, he said to them, "Go back, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd was put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. This report went out into all that land.
Okay, so we get a bit of information from this story. And you're reading from the scriptures, right? So it said tzitzit. In King James, it says the hem of his garment, or the corner, which is the word is kanaf in Hebrew, and it's either the corner of a garment or a wing. And where the tzitzit are, they kind of look like feathers. And so there's a separate story in that story. So we'll let that sit there. But what we learn here is that she had an issue of blood. She touched the hem of his garment. He knew there was healing there and said, "Your faith has made you whole." Now let's go to Mark 5, verses 21 to, well, I don't think we need to read all of it. This Bible is so huge I can hardly manhandle it, but it's great.
Verse 24. Through 34.
Yeah, I think if we read verse 20, chapter 5, verses 24 through 34, if somebody wants to read that.
Mark 5, 24 through 34. And Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. And a certain woman, which had an issue of blood 12 years, and had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. When she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole." And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press, and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said unto him, "Thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, "Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague."
And so we learn a little bit more from that explanation in Mark, which is actually Peter's recollection that Mark recorded. Matthew was not one of the three that stayed right in the pocket with Jesus. It was Peter, James, and John. So Peter would have had a little bit closer view of it. Okay, and then Luke 8. And I think we start at verse 43 through 48. Somebody wants to read it.
And they were all amazed at the mighty power of God. But while they wondered, everyone at all things which Jesus did.
Chapter 8, Luke chapter 8.
Luke, am I in? Just trying to make thunder a little bit. And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood staunched. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, "Master, the multitude throng thee and press thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me?" And Jesus said, "Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me." And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, "Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith has made thee whole. Go in peace." Do you want me to keep going?
No, that's it. So that's three different eyewitness versions of the same event. And we learn a few things. We learn that it'd been going on for like 12 years. She'd spent all her money. She was no better. She was sick. She was weak, desperate, pretty much hopeless until she heard of Jesus. But she came from behind to touch his garment. Now, there's no inherent power in the garment itself, um, but Malachi 4:2. Let's just go there and look at that real quick because um, that's the secret blessing in this story. Malachi 4:2. Come on, I know you're here. So does somebody want to read that one? Just one verse. Okay, John.
But, but to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. You shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall.
Okay, so with this, I love this story because it was such a rare thing in Yeshua's life that he received a blessing. That verse in Malachi was written like 500 years before Christ came to earth. And the belief had developed that that's how you would know the Messiah, is that he would have healing in his wings, his kanaf, the corner of his garment. And so when she, in Western thought, we think she was just trying to be unobtrusive and just get in there and get something. But the truth of the matter is, she knew that prophecy and she knew it applied to him. And that blessed him immensely. And it just almost brings tears to my eyes to think just so few of those moments where he knew somebody got it and knew it was him without any doubt. Her faith was complete. And so that's, to me, a special blessing. But we're talking today about cleansing. And that's the theme of the week. This is unleavened bread, and it's basically we die with Christ and rise again to a new man. And he wants the whole healing. And we saw that in the story Gary shared yesterday, that Naaman came as a heathen, not believing, but desperate. But from that moment forward, once he humbled himself to do the little task that was asked of him, he was healed and he knew that there was no other God. And so for the rest of his life, he said, I won't bend the knee to worship any other God for the rest of my life, even if I have to help the king bend his knee. And in our story with this woman, what did he say? All three accounts say, your faith has made you whole. And that wholeness is important, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But he wanted her to know and not receive part of the blessing because she was trying to slink away, thinking she'd kind of overstepped, but she got what she came for. But he knew, there's people pushing up against him, but a casual touch took no virtue from him. It did not bring healing to those who were casually touching him. And I think the spiritual application for that is pretty obvious. We don't come casually and just believe that God exists, believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and call it good. Go to church every week, and I went to college, I know what I believe. And it had to be with purpose. We have to go to him with purpose and with that longing in our heart to get as close to him as we can. I keep in my Bible, I think it's in this one, a quote by Andrew Murray. I'm not going to look for it, but it basically says the purpose of prayer is to draw as near to the life of God as we can, the heart of God as we can get. And that's intimacy. That's our personal purpose, is to get as close as possible. Christianity has come up with counterfeits of everything, but especially hellfire. And that started me on a journey a long time ago, that when Satan counterfeits something, we need to look at the original to see why he would bother counterfeiting that. And in one of the chapters that talks about Lucifer walking on the coals of fire before the throne. And so now the coals of fire is his altar. And if you look at Eastern religions, the test of manhood, sainthood, whatever, is to be walk barefoot on coals of fire. They even did that on, I think it was Good Morning America, probably 15 years ago, where one of the presenters practiced and got all psyched up, whatever she had to do, and walked barefoot on coals of fire. That's the counterfeit. And the genuine is that it's not the wicked that burn forever, it's the righteous. We will dwell in that consuming fire forever and not be consumed, not be burned up, because all the dross is already gone by the time we get there. And that was such a profound thought to me. And I remember sharing it once in Sabbath school class, and it went on, and it was Royce. He came back and said, wait, you said that like it's a good thing. I'm like, yes, it is. Bring on the judgment. Read Psalms. David's always saying, judge me, bring on the judgment, because it's not us that's judged, it's God, and he's cleared of all of the false accusations. And so the cleansing has to be complete. And so when she touched that kanaf, that wing of his garment, she knew what she was after. She knew where she was headed. In Western thinking, we just think she was just trying to be unobtrusive. But and I don't know Eastern culture nearly as well as Sandra does, but know little bits. And there are just certain things that stand out. We think linear, end to end. Scripture and Hebrew thought is cyclical. You look at 7 days, 7 weeks of days, 7 years of days, spring, summer, fall, winter, moon, once a month, starts over. It's all cyclical. So we can look at it differently when we kind of start to understand those things. But he wanted her to know that she was healed, not just of her infirmity, but her faith had made her whole. That is complete. And he knew, he could tell when virtue went out of him, when somebody touched him with longing and purpose, not just jostling and a casual touch. And the disciples are like, what are you talking about? Who touched me? Everybody's touching you. But he knew, and she came forth and confessed before all that jostling crowd, who had since stopped, what had happened. And so, and the lesson there is that that's our testimony. with the demoniac that wanted to go with him. He said, no, go back to your people and tell what I've done. That's our calling, is to tell what he has done in our lives. That's our testimony. All the doctrine in the world means nothing if it's a head thing and not a heart thing. But he comforted her because he knew she was leaving feeling guilty, and there was no guilt to be had. It was he in Desire of Ages, I think it's chapter 36, A Touch of Faith. Ellen White does a really good job of this. We could just read that and be done with it. But she said he made his way, because she had followed him all the way to Matthew's house, waited outside. When he left, she's following him again, but can't get close. So he knew she was there. So he made his way over to where she could get to him. And that's just such a beautiful thing to me. And then he comforted her. He wanted her to know that she hadn't done anything untoward, that she had done a beautiful thing. And the fact that she knew that prophecy applied to him had touched his heart as well. And so he especially wanted her to feel comforted. Um, so let's look at what it means to be healed wholly. And this, get me on my soapbox, I guess. 1 Thessalonians 5:23. And we will read 24, but not quite at the same time. So does somebody want to read 1 Thessalonians 5:23?
And the Elohim of peace himself set you completely apart, and your entire spirit and being and body be preserved blameless at the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah.
Okay, I don't know what translation that is, but this one, is it the same? Okay. King James says, and the very God of peace sanctify you wholly. And I pray, God, your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. So the we are spirit, soul, and body. And if we are a temple of God, then we have a courtyard, a holy place, and a most holy place. And so the spirit is the most holy place. And that's where, in the beginning, when Adam and Eve were created, that was the place where the Father could communicate with them. And Satan couldn't get in there. He didn't belong there and he couldn't get there. And then once the fall happened, he could get in there. So at one time, the only unsafe place in the world was near that tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, the only safe place in all of everything is in the secret pavilion with the Father, hid with Christ in God. And we are a temple and we have to let him in. And the courtyard represents our health, but also our behaviors. And most Christians spend a lifetime trying to knock down the behaviors. Like, have you ever been to a fair where you shoot down the ducks and the ducks, before you get over here, these are popping back up again? That's kind of what it's like, trying to get rid of the sins, the behaviors in our lives. And so that's just symptoms. That's courtyard stuff, which is informed by the holy place, which is the soul, the thoughts, the feelings, the thinking. And then that's informed by where the motives are, which is in the most holy place. And that's where he wants the cleansing to be. We enter in through the gates and come in the courtyard and work our way back to the most holy place. But the cleansing, there's some that happens here, but the purpose is that the most holy place is cleansed. And that's the Day of Atonement, right? Ultimately. But when that's cleansed, because I can treat you very nice, and think all sorts of bad things about you. And I'm so proud of myself that you didn't know what I really think. What have I done? What have I gained from that? Nothing. I'm a hypocrite, worse than that. But those things are even informed by the motives that are in the most holy place and the roots. Paul talks about the root of bitterness. And if you study the cascade of things that happened when Eve fell, it goes from rebellion that Lucifer had nothing to do with because he hadn't had access to her yet. And she had a foreboding. If you read in Patriarchs and Prophets, I get those two mixed up, on the chapter of the temptation and the fall, that was that foreboding that she had was the Holy Spirit going, get back over where you belong. And she's like, oh, I got this. And went on. And then, so we have the rebellion, the selfishness, and then Lucifer got her with pride and doubt. Did God really say, and oh, you're just so wonderful and you could be even better? God's lying to you. And then she partook and nothing happened. She takes it to Adam, and we're told he ground it out thinking about it for a long time before he finally said, I have your bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, I have to choose you, rather than trusting, which is where we get with all of this, trusting that God can fix it. We don't know how he could have fixed it. I mean, he could have been as simple as just disavowing her vow, but he could have fixed it somehow if Adam hadn't fallen. But then instantly we have guilt, and then with that shame, and then an unholy fear of the Lord when Shua comes walking in the cool of the evening. Adam, where are you? We were afraid. And goes through that whole thing. And so then, well, who told you? Well, this woman that you gave me, this serpent that you made. And so that kind of critical spirit. And then we're told that the whole thing was revealed to them all the way to the end, and what's going to happen as a consequence of us, of their choice, all the way to our end, to the very last person, and everything that Christ had to take on him at the cross. They knew. And so then they also got kicked out. So they ended up with that spirit of bitterness. So there's a cascade of 7 things that kind of informs our most holy place. And then that affects, it proceeds to anxiety and fear and discord and all the things that go on in our mind, which then affects our behavior and our health, our physical health. And so what he wants is to make us whole again, body, soul, and spirit, to where it's a safe place for him to dwell, and it will be safe for us to be in heaven, and we will like it there. Because we were talking yesterday about how you hear from the pulpit, we're going to sin till Jesus comes. And I don't know that there's a worse heresy out there, because he values our freedom of choice more than he values our salvation. He will not violate that. So if there are things that right up to the end I don't want to let go of, he's not going to make me let go of them so he can take me to heaven. I wouldn't be happy there. And so all of his justice and mercy coming together at the cross is just that. What he does is out of mercy and out of love for the wicked as well as the righteous, those that choose him. He's not going to make you go to heaven. And not everybody that thinks they're going is going. Because we will not surrender. The yielding is not, I got to quit smoking, I got to quit eating cheese, I got to be nicer, all whatever. Those are things that are just symptoms of a diseased inward being. And what he wanted for this woman was to make her whole. He didn't want her leaving feeling guilty for stealing a little piece of healing. He wanted her to know that that's his desire for us, is to heal our hearts, our souls. Because spirit, it's in Thessalonians, it's called a spirit. Most places in Scripture it's called the heart, or even the reins. And I used to think that was a real, like, not brilliant word for it. But what tells the horsey where to go? It's the reins. And so it's pretty much a brilliant translation. Um, but we are whole. We got broken up because with the fall, I think that that's kind of where the subconscious kind of came into play, because up till that point, it was safe for them to remember everything. But with the fall, I mean, if you just take the one worst thing you've ever done in your life, and it had to be right here all the time, and you had to remember it and look at it all the time, you couldn't survive it. It would break you. If you had to look at everything you've ever done, I can't even go there. So that stuff's in a place where we don't have to look at it all the time, but the the healing and the cleansing that is part of the judgment of the living, which is the preparation for the sealing, we have to see some of that stuff to know the truth about ourselves, And when that starts in your life, you know it, and he starts showing you things, and it's like, I'm not like that. Am I like that? I'm like that. And okay, do you want to keep it? No, I don't think so. And so we can start surrendering things as we recognize them. And so, especially as Adventists, I think a lot of people grew up thinking that when the judgment started and your name came up, if you weren't ready to go right then, turn left, go to the gas chambers. He's just not like that. He wants us there. But Isaiah, come, let us reason. Is that chapter 118? Um, but he wants to show us where we are not like him. In First John, he says, or John says, we don't know what he's going to look like when he comes, but we will recognize him because we will look just like him. That is such a powerful promise. And I'm like, boy, you've got a lot of work to do. But it's Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's Christ. I can do nothing, but in Christ I can do all things because he does it in me. And that's the whole healing, the whole cleansing. And then as we look at verse 24 of 1 Thessalonians 5, faithful is he that called you, who also will do it. And there is so much hope in that promise, and so much truth in the verse before that tells us what we need to be looking at in our lives as we come. We live in amazing times, and some people get frightened, and so sometimes it's hard to say for such a time as this. We're born to live in an amazing time of history that he has trusted us to become his people, to where he can say, look, my law is just, my law is fair, my law can be kept. And so the whole point of judgment, the whole point of all of it is to clear his record, clear all the accusations against him. The judgment is more about him. We're basically character witnesses. And he wants us to be whole and healthy and so in love with him and cannot wait for the day when we're all in heaven together. What a day that will be. And it just, this story among all of them, I know that we've got several to look at this week, and all we've do is just Naaman yesterday and then this today. But looking at the ways that he's chosen to heal, but he wants the healing to be whole. I don't know if we're looking at the 10 lepers lately, or later, but he healed 10, one came back. So, but he never refused to heal anyone that asked, ever. And how that's supposed to look today, I think we're still trying to work that out. But he never turned anybody down. But the healing is not just, we can't just be praying for, physical healing without being willing for the spiritual and mental healing that comes with it as well. He wants us whole and wholly His. Um, so, any comments? He's behind you, Bob.
Christ was her only hope. Her whole life was on that touch. And she didn't say, if I touch his shoulder or I touch his waist. That was the hem of his garment. So she's like, to me, like down on a dog, like on all fours. And she is determined to push her way through the crowd. She is desperate.
Yes.
And she's determined.
And she was still not getting there, so he turned and came to her.
And it sort of reminds me like blind Bartimaeus. Jesus is passing by. He's passing by. This is your only chance.
The other factor about her is that she had been unclean, considered by her people. Everybody in the village knew that she was unclean. And so for her to be in a crowd was totally unacceptable. And I think that's one of the reasons she was trying so desperate. I mean,
Just kind of be invisible.
To get in there and be invisible. And yet the Lord knew that she needed recognition, that she needed to be shown that she was just fine in Him.
And publicly acknowledge.
Right.
So she's clean now.
I'd like to chime in on what you said, Dale. There's clarification I think that needs to be had here because all of our English translations avoid that word tzitzit or the tassels. The kanaf is the Father's protection over us, right? And from that corner comes these tassels that hang. And they knotted them either with the name of God or with the Ten Commandments, with the letters and the numbers that coincide with them in the writings. There was spiritual meaning in that. And that goes back to the man who was picking up sticks, remember, on the Sabbath? And he was stoned because it was blatant disobedience, rebellion. And the Father instructed them, you must put these on the corners of your garments so that you will remember to obey. You'll be reminded of my commandments. And so you'll think about them. And so this woman, yes, she was unclean. She was not to touch anybody, and anybody who touched her would have been unclean too in the laws of Leviticus, right? So her being in that crowd right there was pretty bold.
Desperately bold.
Yes. But second to that, she would not touch his clothing. She only touched the tzitzit. And that's the only thing she could touch because that represented the righteousness of God and her desire to be obedient and all those things that come along with those tassels. And that was recognized by all the people. If she had touched his garment, they would have probably, really been upset. But she was doing something which was allowed. And I think Yeshua recognized that, and he was pleased that she saw, as you said, that she saw that her faith in his commandments and her faith in who he was would heal her.
Yeah, I just think the whole thing is just a beautiful story. And the chapter in Desire of Ages, A Touch of Faith, is not a very long one, so it's worth a reread because she does it good. She doesn't mention this part, but other than that, she does a pretty thorough job. But that aspect of it, because Western thought, we just miss so much. This book is so full, and we miss so much because I've had people say that the Bible was originally written in King James English. And I'm like, don't think so. But anyway.
This verse in 1 Thessalonians 5:23 where it says, sanctify you wholly, that your whole spirit, soul, and body would be preserved. It's interesting if you do a search in Ellen White's writings with the phrase, truth in the outer court. She says, don't leave truth in the outer court. It's supposed to come in. The outer court is just physical outward stuff.
Right.
Just putting on an act, basically. And she says, don't leave it there. Let it come in and purify the whole thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we are indeed the temple of the living God. And that phrase means the God who gives life to everything else. And we have to be cleaned all the way into the most holy place. If that is filthy, till that record is clean, we're lost.
Can you imagine if this had been going on for 18 years? She wasn't allowed in the temple or the synagogue, right? 12 years?
12 years.
How would you feel if you hadn't been able to go to a meeting in 12 years?
Yeah. It's kind of like, being a leper. You just,
No human touch.
yeah. And that's an important point, that human touch. We are so deficit in that, especially in today's time. And if we do have, a lot of times it's casual touch, but they, whoever they are that determine these things, say that we need 17 hugs a day just to maintain. And most of us are like 50 years behind.
Over in India, they had the untouchables. That was the lowest class there was, because they had the caste system. And those untouchable people were total rejects. If you could understand the culture of, because it's basically the same thing. She was an untouchable. And they just are totally rejected from society. Nobody wants to go near them. Nobody wants to go to church with them. They are separated completely. So it's kind of something I can relate to, the idea of the untouchable.
Yeah. And what kind of life is that to live? Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, well, let's have prayer. Precious Father, thank you so much for this week that we have to come apart and be with you, to learn of you, to understand better this plan of salvation, and in particular this week of cleansing, of becoming set apart for your use, for understanding the magnitude of the gift of your Son, the plan of salvation that you put into place before it was ever needed. Your thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Your ways are not our ways. And sometimes we don't understand, and even when we think we do, we don't, because there's just so much more and so much more. But Father, teach us, like your Son, to trust you no matter what, to trust that even if I can't see what's going on, even if I don't like the way things look, even if I think things are frightening or intimidating or ugly, that I trust you, and that if I belong to you, then everything that happens to me comes to me with your permission, and that it will ultimately result in my good. And Father, I pray that prayer for all of us, that we trust you no matter what. And I thank you. I thank you for being here with us today. We come to you come to your throne boldly because of all that you and your Son have done to make it possible that we are no longer unclean, but that we can come all the way to your throne. And Father, that's a precious, precious thing that we can't even fully take in. Our hearts just aren't big enough yet. But we trust that you are taking us in the way everlasting. And we thank you. Amen.